Hello people and welcome back to the first episode of .NET. So I've decided to call the show .NET. Couldn't think of anything better. If you guys can think of anything better, then leave it in a comment. So anyway, this is number one. I'm going to continue to do this. To start with a bit of personal news. So there would have been a graphic for this, but if you'd watched last week's show, you would have known I had some issues with Adobe and their software. So got that sorted out, or I thought I got it sorted out, and Premiere Pro was working, but Photoshop, etc. were not working, so that's why I don't have a graphic ready for this. There is another video coming. I've got a video on Wattman after I did my RX480 video. A lot of people are interested in how I managed to get the overclock that I got. So I did a Wattman video. It's not going to be as well, it wasn't as straightforward as I thought. I couldn't get the overclock that I got in previously when it was in my machine, but which is quite interesting because for me, I still think I got a pretty good overclock in what I would consider a pretty rubbish airflow case. So that's coming. Getting ready for AMD, getting ready for Ryzen. Obviously, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but personally, I'm waiting for the R5 1600X or 1500X, the top of the line 6-core chip to come out. I will be buying one of those and 16 gigs of memory. And there's a few things I need to do before that. So it's going to go in my old case. My server was in. You guys might not be able to see it, but if I move my camera, here we go. So it's going to be going into that case there. So yeah, it's going to go into this case. So as you can see, it's kind of green. That's going to change. I'm going to strip it all down and spray it up red, because obviously it's AMD, so it needs to be red. Let's move that back. It's better. So yeah, so that needs to be red. And then yeah, we should be good to go after that, guys. I think should be good to go. Let's get this thing. There we go. That's better. It's back in focus. Yeah, so that's going to be happening. So I don't know when they're going to drop the hammer on those, but I'll be buying that and maybe a B350 or an cheap X370 motherboard, 16 gigs of memory, and dropping in a water cooler, and we'll see how it compares to 6800K. So speaking of which, let's get on to Ryzen. So this week, AMD dropped the bomb. As it says here, AMD launches Ryzen, 52% IPC gain, 8 cores, under $330, and you can pre-order it today. So I went to pre-order a wee while ago. I watched AMD's show. I was lucky enough to be able to watch it, and I was quite impressed with what they came out with. Really, really impressive. Just scrolling down here. So, pardon me. Basically, what we thought about pricing previously has just been confirmed by AMD. All the leaks are what people thought of as leaks. Like I said before, I think AMD have been managing this really well. Is bang on the money. So they've only talked about the 8-core family, so the Ryzen 7 family, that's being the 1800X, 1700X, and 1700. The thing that seems to be the kind of delineating factor between these is clock speed and TDP. So 1800X, 1700X are both 95 watt TDP chips, both 4 cores, 8 cores, 16 threads, but with the 1800X, it's 3.6 gigahertz base, 4 gigahertz boost, and 1700X is 3.4 gigahertz base, 3.8 gigahertz boost, with the 1800X at $500 or $499. It's half the price of the 6900K is incredible. And then looking at 1700X, it's $399, but that would probably go up against my chip, the 6800K, and obviously this thing's going to tank it. You'll see in the benchmarks below because it's got 2 more cores, 4 more threads, but it's $25 cheaper than the 6800K is currently. And then the bottom of the rung, the 1700 there, is pretty much the same. It just comes in at 3 gigahertz base, 3.7 gigahertz turbo speed for $329, beating out a 7700K in multi-threading, etc., and cheaper generally than a 7700K. But, and this is the big but, They've only showed single-threaded benchmarks for the 1800X versus the 6900K, and it looks single-threaded. They look identical, but the two below is going to be interesting. I want to see what the single-threaded performance is like versus my 6800K, which is pretty good. It should be the same because they're both Broadwell E. The interesting one is going to be this R7 1700, which although it's 8 cores and 16 threads, which is great, putting it up against the 7700K and a multi-threaded benchmark is a bit of a cheat, really, because obviously the 8-core chip's going to win. Those single-threaded benchmarks are going to be interesting in terms of IPC between Ryzen and Kaby Lake, because obviously it's great that Ryzen seems to have the same IPC as Broadwell E, but let's face it, Broadwell E is, you know, a year old now, and they're not, you know, AMD aren't marketing Ryzen as X99 or an enthusiast grade platform. Whether they're going to do that throughout, the R7 is enthusiast, and the R5 is like gaming, and then the R3 is your standard. But I'm not sure. But anyway, AMD wanted 40% more IPC. They actually got 52%, which is really good. And they used an industry standard test to work this out, so no qualms about that. You get to have a look at the silicon. Again, we've seen this silicon. Unlike people had concerns earlier on, I had a concern earlier on that it was going to be 2 4-cores fused together. That's basically what it is, a 4-core here and a 4-core here and an interconnect. It'd be interesting to see if that has any issues, legacy issues, say maybe a year or two down the line, because obviously Ryzen has a 4-year, 5-year lifespan. So I don't think AMD would look to change the microarchitecture at that level that quickly, but you never know, they could do. And then going down, they just, here we go, this is the benchmark, so this is versus 6900K. You can see it beats it in Cinebench, multi-threaded by 9%. It has the same single-threaded performance, which is interesting. 1700X, again, this is Cinebench, 6800K, it's beating it by 39%. Which is no surprise because it's 2 more cores, 4 more threads. Like I said, I think it's 6-core. I need to wait to see what that is. But I see what AMD are doing. They're going for price point here, and that's really should force Intel to do something. So all in all, very, very impressed. So you'll be able to get these March 2nd. You can go and have a look at retailers at the moment. But for me, just thinking, I'm looking at these numbers and watching the presentation and some of the gaming presentations, gaming and streaming together, just totally impressed. So happy that AMD have actually managed to make this work. Looks like they've made it work, and looks like they're gonna force people to look again at AMD. It'd be good for AMD to get some money back, get some market share back, to be able to push their business forward, so that you know, I don't want it to go back to the way it was, where we have AMD and we have Intel for maybe a few years fighting it out, and then AMD make a bad choice or whatever, people just move away from them. It would be great if they could use this to their advantage now and to be able to stay in the market. Anyway, let's move on. So I find this as well, it's quite interesting. I was just hunting about the internet. Pardon me, guys. It's root beer. It's not alcohol. And in Britain, you'll know these guys as Scan, pretty good company. And in America, they'll be the equivalent. I don't know who it would be, but you can go and check them out. Scan.co.uk. And they're selling overclock bundles. So I was just interested to see what the overclock was, because no one's talked about overclocking yet. Well, they've talked about it, but no one really knows. So these guys, these bundles are available to buy on the 2nd of March. So I'm assuming they've been overclocking them in-house. So you can get this AMD Ryzen 1800X, remember that boost to 4 gigahertz. And you get an Asus X370 Crosshair, big deal, 16 gigs DDR4, blah, 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 blah. A grand, it's pretty cheap, it's pretty good. It comes with a water cooler, so it should be kept cold. Now, this is the interesting bit for me, processor and description. So processor, AMD Ryzen 1800X, 8 core, 16 threads, overclocked to 4.2 gigahertz. That's only 200 megahertz above the boost speed. Now, normally I would be concerned about this, but having nothing against Scan, I think Scan are actually one of the better kind of companies out there. I've bought stuff from Scan. In fact, I bought my motherboard and chip from Scan, my 6800K. But I have dealt with other people's machines that pre-builds from them. And whereas normally I would be worried about, oh my god, Ryzen isn't gonna overclock, we're only getting 200 megahertz out of it. I'm not really worried about that because Scan tend to be quite lazy overclockers. They will go for the bog standard, safest overclock they can get. And they're not going to push the chips that much further. I mean, basically, they want to build. They will get all the parts. They'll build it, and they'll put in what you would think of as a fairly conservative overclock, and then they just test it for 24 hours before they send it out the door. So these guys aren't going to be sat tweaking these machines to get the best performance out of it, because essentially all they want to do is put everything together, make sure it boots into BIOS and Windows, and then basically go into the BIOS again and put in an XMP profile for the memory and just do a really simple multiplier overclock if that's how it works on Ryzen. I'm assuming it is. I'm pretty sure it's going to be just like overclocking on Intel platforms now, because there's no North Bridge to worry about. And then they just want it to sit and run for 24 hours and have no issues, so they can send it out of the door. Like I say, I've worked on machines that people have bought from Scan, so I know the build quality is fantastic. But I've always been able to push the chips way beyond what they would say is an extreme overclock. So while it's interesting that there's a company out there selling overclocked Ryzen systems at the moment, so we do know, the positive thing is that we do know that 8 core will go beyond 4.2, beyond 4 to 4.2, which is interesting. But I think there's probably a lot more headroom there to push it, because these 8 core chips, when you look at the stratification between the 1800X, 1700X, and 1700, that stratification, as far as I'm aware, I haven't had any, there are no real details on the kind of microarchitecture yet, is all based on core clock speed. So I would say that the 1800X would definitely overclock beyond 4.2 gigahertz, because for them to have that 8 core lineup, and all these chips will essentially be the same and just binned, they must have a very good binning process. So if you're buying an 1800X, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a chip that will go beyond 4.2. I might be completely wrong, but I don't understand why AMD would sink so much money into R&D for a chip that will only push 200 megahertz past its boost clock speed. Like I said, I could be wrong, but I thought I'd bring that to your attention because I find it quite interesting. So there you go. You know that Zen's going to go to 4.2 at least anyway. And then moving on, this was quite interesting. I found this as well. This is on CNET. And it's just a tiny little thing about Intel slashing prices by 60%. So, because everyone's been asking what are Intel going to do, and up until now, you know, Intel's line has been like, we've got our roadmap, we're doing our own thing. Yes, we know what AMD are up to, but you know, it doesn't really concern us. We're just going to keep moving forward. You know, it doesn't matter. We've got our 10-year plan. We're going to that. Well, not according to this anyway. So. This comes from Bloomberg.com. There was a report out by Bloomberg, and it said that Intel will cut Pentium prices. Now, I don't know if they mean Pentium meaning their core lineup, as well as just things that are actually labeled Pentium, by up to 60%. So yeah, so some of the chip makers, Taiwan-based kind of customers, including Microstar and Gigabyte Technology, said they were informed by Intel officials that the price cuts would go into effect on July 23rd. So July 23rd this year, according to this, so according to Microstar and Gigabyte, that Intel will be slashing their prices by up to 60%. And again, down here, they're just basically talking about, I'm in fact, this is quite interesting as well. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Rival AMD reported last month that its market share had increased more than 20% for the first time in 4 years. Also last month, Dell bought AMD chips for its computers for the first time in a long time. So in fact, guys, do you know what? I've just looked at the date. Don't listen to me. This was dated 2006, so don't listen to this. But anyway, if anyone remembers back in the day, that's what Intel had to do when AMD released the first lineup of FX chips. So there you go, guys. That's the problem with live broadcasting when you don't have a huge amount of time beforehand and you think, oh, actually, I've read something about this. I'll go and look it up. So yeah, what I was just talking about was in 2006, but kind of echoes 10 years later to what Intel will probably be doing. But there are lots of at the moment in the States, for instance, in Newegg and places like that. Intel are lowering their prices. They haven't really lowered them in the UK yet, but we'll sweep that one under the carpet and move on because I don't want to talk about that anymore. So if we went over to video cards and I was reading about the 1080 Ti because I was thinking, well, it's about time that dropped because Nvidia are probably going to refresh the Pascal series and they still don't have a Ti card, well, a 1080 Ti anyway. So I found this is from earlier this week. Basically, it's just a header. It's quite funny though. It's just a header from Intel's keynote speech that they're going to be doing at GDC. So it's just these source file names, and 1080 Ti, 1080 Ti countdown. So yeah, so that's it. It's just the header to this graphic here. So based on that, everyone says the 1080 Ti is coming. It will be coming. There's no two ways about it. They're not going to miss out on launching a 1080 Ti. And then a few days later, again on video cards, yeah, they just reported that the release date for the 1080 is going to be mid-March. Nvidia will use the keynote speech at GDC to announce the 1080 Ti. It's not really surprising because at GDC, AMD are going to be pushing Ryzen and moving on to Vega coming later in the year. So Nvidia want to be there with something. And people have been wondering about the 1080 for a long time. It's no surprise to me that a 1080 Ti is coming. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone else. It's what they will do. They always do this. It's just where it sits in that price point between a 1080 and a Titan. I would expect the Titan's price wouldn't change. The 1080 would drop a little bit and the Ti would sit in between. So I think the 1080 Ti might be around $700 and the 1080 might drop to about $550. I know you can find them for around $550 at the moment, but I think across the board it should drop to about that. It might not, based on what Nvidia has already done. They've already kind of messed up their pricing structure with the release of Pascal and the whole kind of Founders Edition thing. Although I think they'd be silly to do that with the 1080 Ti card. I mean, equally, they might just release a Founders Edition 1080 Ti and be done with it. I don't think that's realistic. I think they make way too much money from adding board partners to cut them out of the Ti. But interesting that it looks like it's going to be coming before the summer. It makes sense because Vega's got a kind of second half launch, maybe sort of June, July expected launch date. So it makes sense for AMD to dump in the GTX 1080 Ti and pretty much make a lot of the Vega cards, I would have thought, not irrelevant, but not as appetizing as they were pre-GTX 1080 Ti. So hey, feel free to have a read through this. There's not a huge amount in it. And like I said, it's just kind of mainly going on about the previous article, and then they're just saying, yes, it's been confirmed, blah, blah, blah. And then moving on to Vega, because there's not been a lot to say about Vega recently. So I was reading about Vega as well, because I'm quite excited about it. I really wanted to wait for Vega. I really wanted my next graphics card to be a Vega graphics card. I just don't think I'm going to be able to wait that long. My 2970s are fine, it's just I have issues with connectivity more than anything else to the two panels, because both my panels are high bandwidths, one being 4K and one being 1440p, 144 hertz. So I need more than one DisplayPort out. The card I have only has one DisplayPort out. If I had two, I would not be in a hurry to get rid of my 970s. I think they're great cards. They've done me really well. They're still going strong. I haven't even had to take them apart yet. When I had a 770, after about a year, I had to take that thing apart, replace the thermal paste, clean it up. It was not good, but it was okay, you know. But these things, they've been running strong since I've had them. I've never had to take them apart, so sad to see them go. But equally, it would be nice to have something new and have something new and not from Nvidia. Something new from AMD would have been good. I really enjoyed the RX 480 when I got my hands on that. I thought that was a stepping stone for AMD to move on to something better. They've just taken a while to get to that something better. I mean, it's not far off a year since they released the RX series, the 460, 470, and 480. To be honest, I kind of expected Vega to have dropped around January for them to kind of build on that momentum. Although they might still be able to take advantage of it with the RX launch behind them, the Zen launch being a Ryzen launch being behind them, which looks to be very successful. And then, you know, if they can get something out end of June, they'll keep that momentum going, which would be really, really good, because by that point, Intel will have started their kind of cycle of getting ready, getting people pumped for the next core lineup, which I'm pretty sure is still going to be on 40 nanometer, I think, from what I was reading last week, which surprises me. But anyway, guys, I digress. You can tell I've been reading more about this stuff. I've had a bit more time. Work and things aren't quite as stressful. So here we go. Yep, they're just talking about what I was talking about, the RX 470 and 480 there. So let's go down. And then about Ryzen CPUs looking like it'll be good. And then they're talking about the deep learning cards they released earlier in the year, the MI25 lineup. We'll touch on the GTX 1080 Vega architecture. So all stuff we already know before. High bandwidth cache, 4 times power efficiency over an RX 480, I think is what that relates to. 8 times capacity stack, that's obviously to do with the memory. So, oh no, 2 times peak throughput per clock, that's because of the architecture. Actually, that's not new. And then they're calling it Next Generation Compute Engine, or NCU, which is good because GCN needed to change. And yeah, they're kind of this article kind of goes over a lot of things that we already know about Vega. And then it gets interesting down here once it gets to the Vega specs. They're kind of talking about they don't think an RX 490 will be released. I'm not so sure about that. I think the 490 might be released. I think putting two RX 470 chips onto one PCB is not a bad idea. It's not a great solution, but it's not a bad solution. And AMD have formed for that. They quite like dual GPU cards, so I could see that happening. When they talk about second gen HBM2 and its high bandwidth, blah 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 blah. Where are we now? I did read they were talking about pricing. Yeah, and they're just saying here second half, so around about June. They think June, July for Vega, which would be really, really good. Really, really good. It's about time something happened in the graphics industry. This is interesting. This is where they talk about pricing and also where the GTX 1080 will sit. Vega 10 cards. So they think possibly the high end, which I tend to agree with, a high end Vega 10 card might be around $650, $700. I think that's fine because it's going to be competing with the GTX 1080 Ti, and I think Ti will sit at about $650, $700, $750 when it's released, so it makes sense to me. And then obviously they'll have a tiered approach to the 500 series as they have with all their other series of cards, and they reckon they'll be competing in price with the 1070, etc., etc. So around the sort of $450, $500 mark. Not sure if they'll release anything below that, to go after the 1060 because the RX 480 does that. So they might just release a few high-end cars. They might release something to go after the Titan. They'll definitely release something at the 1080 Ti, 1080 level. Probably more like 1080 Ti level, I would have thought. And then something a bit better, but not quite as good as a 1080. So something a bit better than a 1070, not quite as good as a 1080. So you've got that market segmentation. And again, $500 seems reasonable. Although the pricing might change. I mean, AMD have been super aggressive with their CPU pricing, and they probably will force Intel into a change. God, I can't believe I was reading an article that's like 10 years old. Sorry about that, guys. I did think there was not a lot of graphical input in that. But we make mistakes. It's a Sunday night. I'm tired. I've got to go back to bloody work tomorrow. So yeah, exciting times. Again, there's not much else in this article. There's a lot of kind of stuff we've seen before that AMD have showed, like Vega in action with Doom. I mean, it's great that they're showing it in action with Doom, but to be honest, they're probably using the Vulkan API, which is really, really good. Like AMD have got asynchronous compute down. But at the end of the day, Doom isn't exactly the most demanding game, shall we say. And then they're just showing this like Battlefront 2 footage down here as well that we've seen already. So interesting, an interesting overview if you're kind of not that up on what's happening with Vega or what's happened with Vega, or maybe you're not aware of what AMD have done in the enterprise space where they've already moved cards and systems in there. This is a really good article because it ties a lot of things together, so I think it's worth reading, definitely. And that's really it, guys. Quite psyched, quite excited about things that are going to be happening. Like I say, the video coming out tomorrow or the next day, depending. I'm kind of hoping that I don't have any more issues with Adobe. I think if I continue to have issues with Creative Suite, although I love it, Creative Cloud, I might bin it and I might go over to Sony Vegas and DaVinci Resolve. Don't really want to do that because of the functionality that Creative Cloud gives you, but it's just been a few weeks of absolute hassle, and I've had to close my account a few times, reopen it, and then on the phone or live chatting to people, and it's getting annoying now. But I'm willing to give them. They said there shouldn't be any issues. There hasn't been for a couple of days, so I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because I really like the software. Then we're going to be doing a kind of video where I show you stripping this down, getting it all sprayed up. I've still got power supply and all sorts of things in there from my dual Xeon rig. So I'm glad I kept this case because I really like this case, and it'll look really, really sweet, sprayed up red and black. It'll look really good, and then a nice AMD CPU in there. But that's it, guys. I mean, if you got any questions, fire a question in. I'm going to be online again for another sort of couple of minutes, I would have thought. But if there aren't any questions, I'll wrap up the live stream. And then if you think of anything after the fact, just email me at backbeyondtech@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment. That'd be great. I'll try and reply. I always try and reply to the comments. You've been watching the channel for a while, you know that's true. Well, guys, if there's no questions coming, I'm gonna wrap up the live stream now. But like I said, just to finish off, well done AMD. I think Ryzen looks amazing. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be buying an 8-core. Like I said earlier, I'm waiting for the 6 cores to drop, but apparently they're gonna come around the middle of March. So I'm gonna get a 6-core, a cheap X370 motherboard, and 16 gigs of RAM, and then we'll be putting that up against the 6800K. Pretty much with the same build. I'll probably use one of the 970s in it as well. Just interested to see what the actual comparison is like, gaming, Cinebench, all the rest of it, because I know AMD are going after pricing segments, but I'm kind of interested in core to core, 6 core against 6 core. How does it stand up? And I really do think if that 6 core comes in at like £250, and then £150 for motherboard, 100 quid of memory, you've got a 6 core CPU, a really good setup for £500 because I've got the case and everything. That's a very compelling price to performance kind of workstation slash gaming PC. So anyway, guys, I'm gonna get on out of here. Thanks very much for watching. Things are starting to get back to normal. Things are looking up a little bit personally, so I'm not so stressed out about job prospects and things like that. So hopefully things will start to get back to normal with the channel. That's going to be great. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your support. Take it easy.